religion and the connections that religion has all over the world. And I suppose that's where I come in response to hearing that, BME communities don't engage on climate change or on environmental issues. And what I was able to do was highlight that in the UK, that we have all these connections to different parts of the world. So it's far from the truth when people say that BME communities that have all these connections to different parts of the world aren't concerned about climate change. And the reason why they're much more concerned about climate change is that they're from different parts of the world that have been impacted, and they have first-hand experiences and stories of what the climate crisis can look like and has looked like. So that was where I started from, my starting point. And again, we're thinking about connections to different parts of the world was about faith and how faith actually plays a very dominant role within communities here in the UK. So when we talk about BME communities, a lot of them come together around their faith. So that made me go on a journey of looking at the role of religion and faith around environment. And similar to what Karen was talking about what religious texts, and she used what the Jewish text had said around our responsibility for looking after the planet. So looking at all the different religions, there was many texts that spoke about the stewardship of the land, non-dominance of the planet, reserving natural resources, mindful of waste, greed, being part of one ecosystem, planting trees, greed and waste, exploitation, corruption. Again, this was repeated many times in different religious texts. However, what was interesting was the way it was interpreted. So it goes back to what our first speaker was talking about. How do we interpret things? And when I was myself being an environmentalist, and when I was looking at these texts, I was very much interpreted in the way that I wanted to see it. And that was very much like from an environmentalist angle and lenses. Those were the lenses that I was using. And what I found was that many women did the same, as opposed to men. Men were interpreting things in a different way, in a different light. So the dominant stewardship question became a dominant care question, right? And the care angle seemed to fit and resonate with women a lot more. And what I saw on the ground was that there was a lot more women coming forward to doing more environmental projects, having more dialogues around environment than men were. However, when it came to the decision-making side, the women weren't around the table, yet they were the ones that were doing all the groundwork. They are also the ones that are impacted the most, both globally and in the UK. Women will be and are impacted by the climate crisis much more than men. And yet, when it came to decision making, even within faith groups, they were the ones that were behind. So in practice, what can we do? Right. So there's many things that we can do as faith groups. So we can have a look at the first thing, the easiest thing that I think, which for some people can be the hardest thing. It can be the first stepping stone to breaking the ice, is probably having those dialogues, just having those conversations, either intra-faith or interfaith conversations and dialogues. Then it's looking at divestment. And then it's looking at infrastructure, buildings and grounds. And then let's have a look at collective and individual action. So I'll go through each one of these and give you a little bit more details of what I mean by each one. So starting off with dialogue, right? So dialogue is very important. Dialogue connects us. Dialogue opens up those conversations. Dialogue tells us how we have similarities, where our commonalities lie, but then also where our differences lie, where the tensions are. So it's really important to have these open dialogues. And the work of Interfaith Scotland, Interfaith Glasgow, the Religions of Peace, Peace and Unity. So there's many in the Folklore group, and there's somebody here from the Folklore group who have recently had a big event looking at religion and faith. So all of these organizations that do wonderful work, it's very important that environment is on their agenda. So it's very important to have these conversations so that we can all work together, have that collective vision is really important. And then divestment. So divestment is one that many people shy away from. They think it has nothing to do with them, but it goes back to planting trees. So thinking about planting trees, right? It was one of the slides that said, well, we also need to stop deforestation. So a lot of our money, when we think about pensions and investment, actually goes into organizations, companies, industry that do a lot of the deforestation. So thinking about either individually where your pensions go to, or if you work for an organization or company, think about where they invest. And then also the faith group, where is your money being invested, right? So thinking about then trying to move away from investing in the wrong things, especially deforestation. So yes, on one hand, we can plant trees and that can help absorb some of the carbon from the atmosphere, but at the same time, let's stop deforestation. Then infrastructure. So thinking about the buildings. So we've got, so what the picture that I showed earlier on was one of Cambridge Mosque, which has become an eco mosque, and they looked at their infrastructure. So I've worked with lots of community and faith groups around Scotland, trying to improve the infrastructure to make it more energy efficient, to make it have a less carbon footprint. So there's a lot that we can do with infrastructure of your building, right? So if you have the resources or you are able to get funding, it's really important to start looking at the infrastructure of a building. But then what gets neglected is the grounds of the building. And this is really important because the grounds of the building can be beautiful spaces. So not just for growing trees, but actually think about, can you grow vegetable patches? Can they bring communities together? Can they provide sustenance when we're facing a climate crisis? So thinking about the grounds is really equally as important. And also thinking about the trees that you plant. What kind of trees are they? Are they just ornamental trees, or can the trees also provide a purpose as well? Action. So collective and individual action. So what can we each person do, and what can we come together? So here in Scotland, there's been a lot of collective action. So some of the pictures I've got here are around the One Big Picnic. The One Big Picnic happens annually in Glasgow. And unfortunately, due to the COVID, it hasn't happened over the last 2 years. But what it does is it brings people of different faith groups together, people that might not speak to each other, but around food, right? So it brings them around food, or it can bring food, and thinking about food in terms of food for nurturing rather than just food as a commodity. So at the One Big Picnic, there are lots of free stores, the stores that have free food that are given out to members of the public for people to come, join, eat together, talk together. So that is one collective way. Another collective way is that people come together to mark different festivals, right? Festivals that are based around nature. So this picture is is a picture of the one in the middle with the fire is a picture of a pagan festival. So thinking about the festivals that different religions have, and how do we come together and share those festivals with each other as well, is really important. And then thinking about women as change makers. So going back to what I said at the beginning, that each and one of us women are change makers, either in our households, in our communities, but we have the power to make the change. And I've come across many wonderful women that actually do so much work. For instance, a little while ago, I came across a young person, a Sikh young person who's in the picture at the bottom, my right, who has made this mural to talk about the plight of the farmers in India and highlights this. And this mural is made out of old plastic, so recyclable plastic. And she's created this mural. So she was featured as part of a group of women that are called the Glasgow Climate Sisters. So each one of these Glasgow Climate Sisters was involved in creating creating a creative exhibition piece and linking it to a climate crisis. So somebody created a dress out of old denim and tartan and talked about the fast fashion industry and the pollution that it causes on villages around the world. Somebody made a sculpture, and they made a sculpture out of old wood and again connected it to deforestation. And then there was somebody who looked at plastic, and she was from El Salvador, and she made beautiful bits of plastic jewelry and connected it to the marine life and also the pollution in the ocean and how the plastic travels across the world. And the plastic that she gets on the beaches of El Salvador actually doesn't even come from around that part of the world. So this was some of the work that the Glasgow Climate Sisters did. And on the left hand of my screen is some of the work that Interfaith do with women and talking and connecting women. And this particular project was looking at the differences around headscarves and headwear. So again, but then connecting it to a lot of the work that they do and the dialogues that they have, they connect it to environmental work, and being in nature is really important.